Hey guys, how are you all? Good day instead of good morning or good afternoon, good evening. It's a good day from Australia. I'm Rajesh Bhavanandam, working as a solution architect here in NGINX. I live here in Australia. So I joined with Mike here. I'll let him to introduce.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mike Holland. I'm also a solution architect with Nginx, based out of Australia. I have to say, though, it is a bit sunnier part of Australia. I don't know, what would you think, Rajesh?
No, it's not sunny. It's Melbourne. I can see all the four part of sunny, summer, winter, everything in a single day. It's a crazy weather here. So yeah, it's cool. Thanks, Mike. Thank you. We got this is the first episode of like a 4-week length. The first one we are going to talk about architecture. So this is the whole 4 weeks. What the idea is to talk about APIM, API Autopsies. If you want to know more about the name, ask Mike. Mike is the one who named it, API Autopsies. It sounds great, but we're going to more talk about APIM and how we can, what's the best practices to run an APIM in any organization. The agenda for today's presentation, as I said, it's about architecture. So we're going to talk about operating model of APIM and some reference architecture and some of the security control recommendations. And I will also ask Mike to actually showcase some of the controller aspect from Nginx, how we can realize it as well. There is no code today. We're going to more talk about what's being used by other customers across the globe, what's the best practices, what kind of reference architecture has been used. So I'll pass on to the mic to start the discussion. It's a very exciting day today.
Yeah, I thought the name was pretty catchy myself. I thought, it just attracts the attention, brings a little attitude to the presentation. No, you don't think so? You didn't like it?
Absolutely, autopsies. When I pronounce it, it sounds great. Autopsies.
Yeah, I was big into my crime scene drama, so I figured that was the way to go. But yeah, so today we're just going to go through a couple different topics, and I got a couple questions to kind of kick things off. So let's start with our first question. So with the day-to-day operations of our businesses, APIs, is something often overlooked during the design phase with APIs becoming fundamental to digital businesses. Probably should have proofread these, huh? We can see several issues creep into this day-to-day work. Issues we often see include exposing API endpoints without protection, monitoring, or analytics, which can create risks for the business. What steps would you include during the initial phases of design to ensure these issues are included in an API management operating model?
That's a good one, Mike. From an APIM perspective, when it comes to operations, there is always a say in a software, like 10 to 15% of the time we spend during the development, and almost 80 to 90% we spend in operations. Defining an API operating model is quite essential for any organization, and there is no like a one-size-fits-all. There is no one operating model. Let's say you just go and put it in every organization. It actually differs from organization to organization. The reason for that is it totally depends on how you have structured your team, how the culture of the team actually works. So just giving an example. Some companies, some enterprises have noticed that they tend to go with new features or bug fixes on everything. Within a day, they can release multiple times. They can actually, automate it end to end, and they have a different culture of actually deploying during the daytime. They mandate the developers to do that way. The other set of companies I have noticed they even tend to go a week or even a monthly life cycle. So this type of a culture dictates this whole operating model. However, I don't want to go into each and every one of them, but instead we'll try to collect those information, like what's the common denominator across the globe, what they have used. As you can see in the slide, it's at the top level. What you can see is as per the phases, the development, peer review, and QA pre-prod production. These are all the like high level phases, which is common denominator across all the organization I have seen. among all of these, the peer review and QA is the most time-consuming steps in the whole process. The peer review, some companies actually tend to do as part of their development, or some companies actually tend to do this as an aftermath of actually doing, developing the code. The QA is the same case. Some of the companies tend to actually go and do this manually, do it, and some of the companies do it completely automation. That actually includes the security aspect as well. They tend to actually do a review and the QA on the security aspect by actually writing automation code to make sure there's no the vulnerabilities or the security code leak from a development point of view. So all of this actually combines it to be part of this whole operating model. So back to your question of how do we actually during the design phase, how do I ensure none of these actually issues get included? One of them is definitely the peer review helps quite a lot. If it sits along with the development, it's not an aftermath bit. If it sits with because end of the day, it's all about quick feedback. The feedback loop, how quickly you actually close that it's going to make your the design phase and the development phase more and more secured. So that I would strongly recommend to be coupled that review along with the development process. And I'll also recommend the QA process to be automated as much as you can. So by applying right level of security measures and the functional measures within automation code, so that you quickly get that feedback back to the development. So you don't have to complete the whole pre-prod or test cycle all the way go to deploy and do it. So that's one thing we are seeing that's working really well with a lot of organizations.
Fantastic. Hey, so the peer review, is it slower just because of the human aspect, or?
It is definitely because of the human aspect. It is slower, and most importantly, it depends on when it happens. If it does happen organically just after the development, it is fine. But I have seen some customers actually do that after you deploy that to a test, because if you keep that as like a more of a tick box, then what happens is as part of the process you have to wait for the tick box that needs to be happen instead of actually doing that organically. Some people actually tend to do that as a process thing, which is not a great idea. So that's exactly where it actually slows it down.
Are there any ways peer review can be done like in parallel with multiple departments or multiple groups as opposed to a serial type approach?
Absolutely. So that's definitely that I have seen it's working. One is the peer review. When we talk about it, also includes multiple persona within the DevOps culture. So one is it could be a code functional review. The other one is more from a security aspect, like how badly we have written a code where there may be a leakage on the code, and it would solve the it would create a different kind of a vulnerability. So yes, having a parallel review from a different personas within a DevOps team would help that really well. And most importantly, it's a third pair of, I wouldn't even have a second pair of view. It's a third pair of eye to have a looking into it. Always gives a great vision into the code, what is happening.
Fantastic. So if the company were to put in some automated testing, would that go in the QA section, or would that be more of a peer review type of?
No, it is. It would be part of the QA, because that one to a previous question when you asked about the peer review, the QA also should be parallel to the development. I have seen a lot of companies here in Australia as well as in abroad. I have seen people tend to write the automated testing along with the development. Even sometimes they tend to write those test cases even before they write the code. So that level of like a test-driven development actually helps the QA to be automated really well. And also, writing that parallelly gives a lot of exposure to the developers as well to it. And it also depends who is writing the QA. I have seen developers, some of the enterprises tend to ask their developers to write the test cases in first place before you write the code. And you have a dedicated QAs as well sometimes to do that one. So both way it works. It totally depends. I quite like when it is actually done by both, because when the developers write their own test cases, the QA test cases, they actually try to get into a boundary, but the QAs tend to actually try to break the code. So it's better to actually have both of the ends in place to be written parallelly.
Fantastic, thanks. All right, so so the next part of the questions will kind of move more our focus towards the API management architecture. And my question is, using a real-time API reference architecture, as recommended by Nginx, we would normally have 6 different entities deployed by our customers, such as API Gateway, API Policy Server, API Developer Portal, API Security Service, API Identity Service, and DevOps Tooling. Could you briefly provide an example and the benefits of each one of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is an interesting one, but also it actually go and touch base with the previous and things which we discussed. Most of the companies actually does not actually run all the entities for API management. So they pick and choose. As you mentioned, the API Gateway, the developer portal, security service, identity service, these are all like a more of a mandatory one, which most of the companies actually tend to select. If you look into one of the aspect, what we recommend is called a policy server. Policy server is not an entity which every organization writes. The reason for that is the policy server tend to give you a dynamic level of authorization to the APIs. So if your business does not dictate dynamic authorization on your users to consume an API, then policy server is not quite needed in this whole picture. As you can see in this particular slide, actually talks about almost all of them what you just discussed when it comes to protect your APIs. So the DDoS mitigation at the edge and having a right level of ADC which get attached to a fraud detection. Again, the fraud detection is more from a security aspect of a security service aspect of it. Not every company is needed. Mostly the banks tend to use this kind of, banks or financial institution tend to use the fraud detection. The WAF is a quite important aspect of this whole life cycle, where you can actually mitigate a lot of problems what's happening currently across the globe. The identity provider, which you mentioned, helps the user to authenticate and the gateway to authorize the tokens issued by the identity provider. So it's something which actually helps the every company to make sure that unauthorized access on their resources is completely stopped at the edge of their infrastructure. The benefit what the WAF brings into this particular stack is, when I say WAF, this is more of a security service. WAF specific ones is some of the services provided by FI and Nginx actually helps you to mitigate problem that happens with the code level as well. For example, let's say your teams are running a different type of services that's written in a different language. Let's say Node.js or Golang or Java. So all of them actually comes up with the vulnerabilities every day. So the WAF should be good enough to capture all of these vulnerabilities, because the vulnerabilities actually does not, I mean, these days it's really fast and it's occurring like every day. And if you do not analyze it and try to patch that in time, then you have vulnerable code to the end user. Anyone can actually go and hijacks information from your code. So it's very, very important to get that level of policies to be applied at the edge, so that you protect your backend services until you upgrade your Java version from 6 to 7 or Node.js version from the previous version to the latest version, which actually fix those vulnerabilities. So that's how the tools actually helps in this whole stack. Hope that answers your question.
Oh, that's fantastic. And the picture really kind of highlights each of the entities. I was curious on one piece of the picture here. Is there any, or your thoughts and opinions on moving the identity provider closer to the edge? Is there a need to run the traffic through fraud detection or WAF if the traffic isn't authenticated?
Absolutely. So that has been done. So that's instead of actually moving itself, it actually works with the combination of fraud detection, because the runtime analysis of the user where it's coming from, creating a fingerprint on where that user is accessing it frequently and what he is trying to access, and the whole fingerprint should be created and managed within this whole fraud detection. So instead of actually moving it, I have seen customers actually pass those information analytics, the metrics between the identity provider and the services to just build the whole fingerprint for a user.
Okay, awesome. All right, so just We're currently hosting our APIs in-house, but we're interested in moving a subset of our new services into public cloud, save some money, spread those resources out. How can a single or multi-cloud reference architecture help the business?
It's actually, this is a very important one, and I also quite like when you said that it's an on-prem, because I have worked with the multiple customers, and there are a lot of customers are really skeptical to say that I do not want to call on-prem as a legacy, because there is a movement when people say that, oh, it's an on-prem is a legacy platform. So some of the customers do not like that at all, because they tend to run their core business within on-prem, and they have no intention to move away from that level of approach, moving away from the on-prem workloads into that. There are certain workloads they prefer to run on-prem, and there are certain workloads they prefer to run in the cloud. You also, your question when you asked, you talked about single and multi-cloud as well. So let me start with a single cloud. When a customer move from an on-prem to a cloud, they always tend to actually sign with a single cloud provider. It could be a GCP or AWS or Azure or any other cloud provider in the market. So that's how they start to actually push it. But period of time, once they get matured with how they are operating, because operating such a vast infrastructure is not a quite easy one, because you are moving away from a very contained environment into a completely dynamic environment. It solves a lot of problem, but it introduces new problem. So I have seen customers actually slowly moving to single cloud and then moving into multi-cloud, actually seen more success rather than jumping directly into the multi-cloud. And most importantly, the way I have seen is they do not actually scatter their services between multi-clouds, just between a cloud A and cloud B. Instead, they tend to run a LOB specific or a BU specific workloads in each cloud to make sure that they are actually taking care of the right level of fruit from each one of the cloud. A cloud A may be really good in doing data processing or ML kind of things, so they tend to expose that data using that cloud A. The other one is more from a processing power point of view, where they actually have connecting to a core data center with a more secured way. They tend to actually use the cloud B to do that one. I have vaguely I have seen people have distributed the same service across the one, but regardless of that, scattering the services between a single cloud or a multi-cloud or even the hybrid cloud, which actually cloud with the on-prem, it actually brings a challenge to the operation people. We talked about the operating model, is how generically they can onboard these APIs, how generically they can expose their capability to the end consumers. So this is where it is quite important to have a right level of APIM operating model to let the developers to onboard their APIs in a similar fashion, regardless where they run their workloads. End of the day, the service and the interface is completely different. The interface is what you're going to expose it externally. If you're able to actually segregate that onboarding away from whatever cloud it is, then it actually eases your life. So in this particular diagram, as you can see, that the control plane of the APIM actually tend to onboard these APIs through its admin APIs, and then it doesn't really matter where your gateways, your data plane runs. It could be AWS, it could be GCP or Azure or even on-prem. It is quite easy to actually manage it from a different set of providers in a same fashion how we are doing it in one cloud or multi-cloud.
Yeah. All right. No, I really like the different features and functionalities you mentioned in the different clouds. I often watch these presentations and it's all about costs, right? Multi-cloud, but you're right. Like the machine learning or Alexa skill may only be available in one of the clouds or the other cloud-free applications. So that's a really cool distinction there.
Each cloud providers are catching up because it depends on their maturity. They are still catching up, but I think it's also mostly to do with what type of again, it goes back to the operating model. What type of culture, what type of skill set your company have produced. Some companies tend to put everything in one basket. Some companies tend to say, no, I don't want to put everything. I want it to be little loosely coupled. I should be able to move from one cloud to another cloud quite easily by more from an event driven perspective. Then it actually makes sense to move it. But still, people tend to do mistakes of actually trying to do a proprietary tools of a gateway provided by a certain cloud provider or a WAF solution provided by a certain cloud provider, cost them quite a lot. To simplify that, that's why the architecture, the one which you just showed in the previous screen, makes a lot of sense, because regardless of cloud, regardless of on-prem, you can actually apply the API policies, WAF policies, and ADC concept in the same fashion across the different clouds. So that way, it actually reduces the cost. So you don't have to have different builds or different way of onboarding, because again and again, onboarding is what it actually costs quite a lot from a timing consume point of view, as well as from a monetary cost.
Okay. Well, just speaking on this next slide here, you mentioned, the controller, being able to control the data plane wherever your data planes are. But I was also interested in the logging you have here. So the Splunks, the Datadogs. Could you also use a logging that's maybe available in a particular cloud? Why would you or wouldn't you use that option?
Look, I mean, it's end of the day, from if you're choosing an API platform, it's very important. If you're running it also goes back and touch on the previous question. If you're trying to run multi-cloud, or if you're trying to spread your workloads across the one, it's better to bring some uniformity when it comes to log. So cloud A may have a different logging mechanism, cloud B may have a different logging mechanism. If you're trying to have a unified view of what's happening within your organization, that's quite important, because earlier, if you ask me 10 years, 15 years ago, with all the on-prem, we have one place to look for. But now that's not the case. You're trying to scatter across different cloud provider and stuff. So since it's becoming more and more decentralized approach, it's quite important to bring that level of observability of what's happening in all my 3 clouds or 2 clouds, or even in the on-prem, into one place. So that is why this particular diagram is quite important to understand. If you are actually trying to streamline the ADC or WAF, or even the API gateway concept of the world, then it is quite important to push those kind of a logging function back to a centralized log repository to analyze it and to dynamically make a decision, and even for debugging purpose for the operation people to make sure that what type of problems are happening, regardless of logging into cloud A or cloud B. So that actually, again, it goes back to the cost saving, and it is also quite easier for a turnaround time on any bugs or any issues that's happening across the cloud. Imagine this: for consumers, they don't care where you run, cloud A or cloud B or on-prem. For them, they want answers why it's not working. You should be able to pull the answers quite quickly. Again, this goes back to the feedback loop. How quickly can you close that feedback?
Yeah, and response times and all that would be important. But I would think another important thing would be availability, which leads us to our next question. That was a little segue there off the top of my head.
High availability is pretty much taken, right? It is like it's pretty much high availability resilient of the infrastructure, the whole workload. It's pretty much it's taken for granted. When I actually get into this level of things, then it's pretty much we are outsourcing to the cloud provider, saying that I do not care. This is what I've been dealing with this, but I'm coming to you because I want you to take care of this. So absolutely. Sorry, go on. I interrupted you with your.
I was going more for the security angle, but HA is awesome too. We definitely got to have that HA for sure. But the next question. So following on from our initial API management question, with updates and patches occurring frequently in the daily operation of our APIs, so the CI/CD pipeline, what steps should we include to ensure our API endpoint has the appropriate security controls, and I think you touched on this a bit before, applied before being deployed into production?
Absolutely. So the one thing which, as we discussed earlier, it is quite important to do that automation on the security aspect as much as we can. We have to also acknowledge that we can't cover everything. As much as we can, I was keep highlighting that, and the gaps needs to be, because it's kind of a loop. We need to actually go back and revisit again and again and keep adding our automation as much as we can. It's the same review process. The process is not like a one way. Once it's done, it's done. That it doesn't work that way. It's more of a feedback loop of when it comes to functional, as well as you have to give the similar level of weightage to the security as well. If you do, there is a say in security world, when you do, as being a developers, when we actually deliver any code to the wild in the internet, you have to be always right. But the people who's trying to threaten your code, or try to hack your code, they don't have to be always right. They have to be right only once. Once they're successful, you're done. You pretty much you compromise everything to it. So that's why it is quite important to have that level feedback loop again and again to make sure that that's being fixed. So for example, applying WAF kind of things, WAF policies, threat mitigations, and data guarding. What type of data are you exposing? What's the sensitivity of the data? What are we exposing? If you don't have this level of an inventory, it will become more and more hard. Mike, I actually, while talking through it, you're from a security point of view, you are much more experienced than me on this one. What is your take? What do you think? What type of controls do you recommend?
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. I thought of the old adage, life has to win every day, but death only has to win once. I think you're exactly right. That hacker's only got to get one thing right, and they're in there. So I really like, you mentioned before, being able to use your control plane to control all your data plane across multiple clouds on premise. And I think what's real important there from a security perspective is maintaining a consistent security posture. So if you can take that policy and apply it across those clouds without having to change it or modify or figure out how it works in this cloud, not that cloud, I think that's a really powerful thing with securing your API endpoints. But yeah.
You're right. Spot on with that one, because the WAF solution given by different cloud providers actually varies. Maturity level and the configuration level, everything actually varies. So that's why the common components in the previous screen I touched base, the ADC, the WAF, and the API gateway function, if you're actually able to control all of this using a control plane, then you decentralize the data plane, you decentralize the operation of the data plane, but you centralize your control plane to configure all of this one. When you centralize this, it's easier to apply that feedback quite easily by applying the right level of policies across all your cloud. Doesn't matter it's a single cloud or a multi-cloud or even a hybrid cloud. It's quite easy to do. It's spot on with that. You're right.
Yeah.
Good.
Cool.
Mike,
all right, well,
just wanted to do a time check, Mike. It's running really fast. Maybe I'm sure Nginx has got this level of a segregation, like a control plane, data plane segregation. Why don't you give us a bit of an idea about like what does our control plane has to offer to the customers? I'm sure we're not going to do a code show or anything, because that's going to be episode 2. We'll realize it in the code level. At least I would love to see something what Nginx controller or a control plane is going to offer for us.
A little sneak preview of the next couple episodes.
That's right.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. So definitely with all the issues and the architectures and the operating models that we've discussed today, we have Nginx Controller. So Nginx Controller is the control plane for Nginx Plus, and it allows us to provide not only an easy-to-use web GUI to interface with your data plane, but a really rich API, so administrative API that you can use to control all of your Nginx Plus instances, your Nginx AppProtect instances, so our web application firewall across all your clouds, your on-premise deployments, and really helps you to control your API management. So and with those, some of the features to highlight here within Controller is first of all the analytics. So we can see that information can be collected from all your Nginx Plus instances and stored in Controller, but then they can also be forwarded on to, like we spoke before, to your Datadogs, your Splunks, whatever your particular log management environment is, your SIEM, to get all that information into a centralized location so that you can keep track of how your apps are performing, any security events you're seeing. One of the other features here, one of the top features, is controlling your infrastructure. So I mentioned before being able to send those API commands to Controller, and Controller can determine which gateways or which Nginx Plus instances for which specific applications or API managed endpoints to send configuration to. So being able to control your infrastructure from controller, being able to see the status of each of your elements within your infrastructure across all your clouds, and then of course being able to configure them is definitely a plus. And with the configuration, with the Nginx controller, we have a lot of services. So you can go through and design your services as you see fit and push that configuration down to your Nginx Plus infrastructure. So being able to define the gateways, what specific Nginx Plus instances you want specific API endpoints to reside or be controlled from, and then bringing those all together, say maybe by a DNS service, is definitely very powerful and easy to control from not only the web GUI, but that rich API I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, summing it all up is that API management. So being able to turn on that OAuth authentication in front of your API management instance, being able to turn on the security, so that WAF policy, that consistent security policy across your environment, is all configurable through Nginx Controller, which we will definitely talk about more in the upcoming next 3 episodes. So with that quick overview, little enticing view of what's to come, I'd like to open up for any questions.
Any questions, Mike? There's tons of questions. There you go. It's highlighted here. I'll go for this. In addition to REST, our company continues to support SOAP. Does Nginx support SOAP too? It's a multi-folded question. If you are only talking about a pass-through through an Nginx, yes, it does support it. But if you want to do some kind of a WSDL verification or WSDL, validating the SOAP request coming through it, we don't do that yet. Having said that, we are planning to bring that level of support. For example, some of the customers have asked us to do a simple transformation of a SOAP service to a JSON because their backend services are changed to a JSON, but their consumers are also consumers. So we are planning to provide that level of a transformation very soon. So it totally depends what type of SOAP request, SOAP service kind of you are looking for. Please ping us directly. We are happy to help. We are happy to actually if there is something which we could offer straight away. We are happy to show you that. How does Nginx API Gateway compare to AWS API Gateway? How can I identify BAC managed to Nginx? You want to go with that, Mike, or you want me to?
I was thinking about your other presentation you did with the Okta and the identity provider stuff. Would be excellent referral to answer this question, but
that's right.
I would. Yeah, that's where I would go. But there was Rajesh did a great presentation on putting identity providers in front of API management using OAuth. So the Nginx Plus instance API management is able to evaluate your OAuth token, so your JOT and soon encrypted JOTs, to determine the identity of the provider and then validate that it came from the JOT came from where you want it to come from, right? It's a legitimate.
That's right. It's a very simple configuration compared to AWS Gateway. AWS API Gateway is a good one, but it only actually used for a very basic gateway functions. If you have to do a level of authorization, authorization, then you have to write a lambdas. A Lambda application to that one to write that JOT verifier code using Node.js or Go and then attach to it. When it comes to Nginx, you don't have to do all of that. It is actually built in with it. All you have to do is use a simple directive, then it easily quite verified by JOT. And again, and the other aspect I wanted to highlight is the speed, the performance, what Nginx offer compared to any gateway in the market. That includes AWS API Gateway as well. Hope that answers your question. Actually, you know what? Mike would be a great guy to answer this particular question of, what happened to the previous one? Wow.
It looks like the question was so long, it required 2 screens. Yeah.
Right, yeah, okay. it's your area, Mike, because I've been
My area.
talking since morning. Go for it.
Definitely. All right, so let's look at the first one here. I don't know how you say that. 6 Bob ohms. Yeah. Anyway, so the WAF is based on, so just a little history of the WAF. So Nginx AppProtect is the name of the WAF, and it's based on the decades of experience that F5 has had with Application Security Manager, now referred to as Advanced WAF, so AWAF. And we took that module and that years of experience, and we made it a dynamic module, which works really well with Nginx Plus. So we can dynamically turn it on and off, which is really powerful when you want a real small, lightweight load balancer, and then you just want to bolt on security without having to affect that lightweight to begin with. So I'm not sure, I haven't seen the first question come around, but just to start talking about, can Rajesh talk about, so it was specific to Rajesh. I don't know, can Rajesh talk about WAFs? Yes, he can. Yes, he can.
Talk about what we will do. One better thing, Mike, you have a specifically, you are planning to do a session on WAF, I think 3rd week or 4th week, maybe he should come to that one and have a deep dive onto how to use WAF and what's the best practices of using WAF along with Nginx Gateway. I think that would be better rather than to boil the ocean today.
That is good. That is good. No, that's true. That's true. But just to answer, so before we jump on there, so you can block specific IPs. We do allow, or we do have the feature of allow and deny lists if you want to block IPs. And then banning VPN IP and block lots of good users. Okay, I see. Banning can block lots of users. Okay, so yes, you can. We do allow lists and deny lists for IPs if you know them. Oftentimes we get the feedback. I mean, Rajesh mentioned boiling the ocean. Trying to block specific ranges of IPs can be quite an admin-intensive task, finding those IPs and adding them. So we would definitely recommend some type of automated approach when building those allow and deny lists. Anything you want to add there, Rajesh, or jump to the next question?
Oh, we'll go to the next one. That's good. That's good.
Okay, so it looks like it's a continuation here. We can talk about WAF. So Nginx plus ModSec engine was the best practice for enterprise. So ModSec, for those of you who don't know, is an open source version of a WAF that works with Nginx. Since then, we've moved forward with Nginx AppProtect, which, like I mentioned before, is the big IP, the F5 WAF bolted on. So much more performant, a lot more features added into there, and moving forward with development in a commercialized fashion. So it has a lot of support. And if you want to provide feedback for features and functionality, we're able to add those to that based on your feedback. So for an enterprise, I know a lot of enterprises are really concerned about getting support for the products they purchase. And support comes with Nginx AppProtect. It's one phone call to Nginx or F5 support to get your support on your Nginx Plus instance and your Nginx AppProtect instance. So that would be the best practice for an enterprise to get a supported product.
Yeah, just to highlight that bit with Mike's point, the biggest difference between using ModSec and AppProtect is the number of features, as Mike highlighted. The number of features, namely, we actually support all the OS top 10 challenges what you have while in the market. On top of that, we have threat protection, data guard, and a lot more as part of that protect in a fraction of a performance as part of this gateway. And most importantly, all of this information is being inherited from the F5 Research Lab, which is a market leading research lab, which actually go and monitor the wild internet and make sure that all of these problems being captured and mitigated through the WAF solution what we offer.
Yeah, you know what? I'm struggling. I don't know what we're going to talk about week 4. I think we just covered it all. I think we're good. Yeah,
yeah.
Maybe we'll do 3 weeks instead of 4.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one. Do you need HA setup for Nginx controller? Actually, yes, you do need it. With our current release, we actually gives as part of your installation, so you don't have to worry about setting up separately. So this comes out of the box, which you don't have to worry about HA setup in Nginx controller in the given region. That's good. Let's go on to the Nginx Plus. Is a Plusk. Plusk is something to do with this web. I think it is something to do with this WordPress kind of thing, I believe, if I'm not wrong. I do not think this is being supported as part of Nginx Plus.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar, but I remember Plus is something to do with the WordPress side of the world where you can actually add extension. Or this with Nginx Plus, I really doubt we have a support, but we can get back to you on that one. Good.
Cool. All right. That looks like our last question. Yeah.
It's not a question. Somebody made a comment. ModSec rules are kind of hard to understand and edit, and he's spot on with that. Yes, that is correct. That is why we have come up with a more easier and manageable way of actually writing those WAF policies using AppProtect. So the way how you're writing the Nginx directives is exactly the same way you can write the AppProtect WAF policies as well, which is CI/CD friendly. You don't have to turn your head backside to write that more AppProtect policies.
And those signatures are frequently updated by F5. So those same signature sets that are in AdvancedWAF are also Nginx AppProtect. So those updates are pushed out continuously.
Right.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up here. It looks like we're right on time. But next week, API Autopsies, we're going to cover automation. So how to deploy your Nginx controller, your Nginx Plus instances within your multi-cloud on-premise environments and have them report back into Nginx controller.
Do you have any plans to share the code, Mike, so that the customers can go and run on their own environment if they wanted to?
For the right price, I'm happy to share it. Definitely.
I was just joking. Trust me, there will be code, automation code available for you guys to run it on your own. So feel free. We are happy to explain it step by step and assist you through the one.
Definitely. And we're supposed to remind you the slides will be sent out via email. So that's always a popular question we get. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See you next week then. Thank you guys. Have a great